I'm delighted to welcome Shayne Tyler, Group Compliance Director of Fresca Group. Fresca Group have a supply chain in 54 countries, specialising in fruit and veg, and with a number of plants and processing sites in the UK. Um, More importantly for me, Shayne has been the inspiration for a number of people in the anti-human trafficking movement in the UK, and I was so kindly introduced to him last week, and listening to Shayne has reinvigorated me in what we're trying to do here in Scotland. So I'd like everyone who's listening and everyone take some time to listen to what we're talking about today. It has such an important foundation in what we're trying to do across the UK, but in particular what we're trying to do here in Scotland. So Shayne Tyler, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Good morning, Shayne. Very pleased to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
No problem. Thank you. Shayne, all I'm going to just open with is just tell me, your story, and through that story, I'm sure it'll explain what drives you, what happened, Shayne. Why do you do what you do?
There's a leading question. Yeah, I first became aware of what is now called modern slavery when the factory I was operating at the time was on Panorama for the illegal employment of over 200 staff. I woke up on the morning of the 19th of June 2000 expecting a news story to talk about that Panorama, that programme, that evening. And actually what I read on the BBC web page was the story of 58 Chinese nationals dying in the back of a lorry coming through the Port of Dover, suffocating with tomatoes. My first reaction to that story, and I'm ashamed of it, was great, that's going to look good for tonight, knowing that we were going to be on Panorama. Still ashamed of that thought now, but it's an honest thought. And then the TV programme aired, and there was nothing in that programme that wasn't true. We were employing illegal workers. I will still to this day say we didn't do anything wrong, because we didn't. We were complying with the law. We weren't trained to spot illegal documents. And we'd been infiltrated by a criminal gang who were exploiting those workers. And we had workers that were being extensively exploited, as little as 17 pence per hour financially. With the news story of the 58 Chinese nationals and the fact that we had been on Panorama, I was expecting absolute carnage in the newspapers the next morning. I still remember to this day the Sun headline on the 20th of June, the 20th of June 2000, a 20-minute power cut of the BBC. Nobody was just picking up on this story at all. So I vowed to have a look what was going on, and that's when I found I had staff on as little as 17 pence per hour. I had a lady that changed my life. She couldn't afford her rent one week, so the exploiter took it, and as a result of that, she had a child. And then she was put to work. And when you're looking in the eyes of somebody that has gone through that, not only do you struggle to understand that it can happen in society, but when you know that it's happened in your factory, you've got to be a pretty hard person to walk away from that and just say, I'm not going to do anything different. So I vowed that I would go and do something different about it. And in the next 5 years, I found in excess of 180 separate cases before my life changed again, because in the late spring of 2005, I unearthed a criminal gang operating out of the Peterborough area. We got 7 out of exploitation, but there was another 53 we were aware of. And then I received a phone call from the trafficker. He knew my name, he knew my wife's name, he knew I had 2 sons, he knew where I lived. He just called me on my mobile number. I realised that day I wasn't playing tiddlywinks. We were playing a serious game here. And I had to change the way I worked, because I couldn't walk away from it because I knew it was going on, but I couldn't engage it the way I was engaging with it because I was placing myself and my family at risk. So we changed the way we worked. And since then, we've been extremely successful in finding, resolving and providing remedy. For the past 20 years, we've rehabilitated victims of exploitation since 2001, and we're very proud of what we do. But it's just horrendous that it still goes on. It's just there in our society.
What a story. And I think that's I can see what drives you, Shayne. And this is why I think, I've spoken to many people in this, we call it a movement, and you've inspired so many of them, and they're in business. These are people working in companies, and this is my point. That I was trying to. But you've talked about it far more articulately than I could. But um, you're working in a business. This is your business is there to make profit. There's no getting away from that. But actually, there is a human element to this that it trumps everything else. It's not just about money when it comes to situations like this. Absolutely not. And I think there's, you've talked about remedy, and just sorry to, just pick up on that before we move on to the next question is, what do you mean by remedy then? So what do you do to help these victims that you identify?
Yeah, well, remedy can only be defined by the victim, because remedy of what makes it right can only be justified by those who have been done wrong. Yeah. And we often refer to remedy as if it's financial, or refer to remedy as, no, what does the victim need? How do we turn that victim into a survivor? That's remedy. We are not guilty of the crime. Business is not guilty of the crime. But we have a moral responsibility to provide that remedy. Just to go what the driver is for what keeps me going every day.
Yeah.
I'm not driven by the joy of success of finding a victim and turning them into a survivor. That's not what drives me. What drives me is that fear of failure. Because what if we don't do something? If we stand by and allow this, which is happening in our society, to continue, it will keep on continuing and people will be exploited. And it's the fear of failure, of looking into another victim's eyes and knowing that we could have done something to prevent it. That's the power that drives and should drive everybody, because these are people's sons and daughters that are being put in a level of crime that takes away their soul. It restrips everything that makes them human and takes it away. And I don't want people to look in people's eyes. So that's what you have to do. You've just got to realize that we have a duty as a society. Now, regarding what you said about business, we have a duty under the Health and Safety at Work Act. Our duty there is a business, Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 states, business must put in provision for the health, safety and welfare of employees. Well, if modern slavery or worker exploitation is not linked to welfare, I'm going home. No, there's nothing I can do. It's blatantly linked. Yeah. So we have a duty. And if we risk assess ladders, why aren't we risk assessing humans? What are we need to be engaging there and doing whatever we can to help these people.
And that's really good point here about worker welfare, because, we talk about quite openly, about having processes in businesses, and those processes would include identifying the red flags. And we had a podcast recently with Jane Bladen from Staffline who talked about what those red flags are and what to look out for. But to go a stage further than that, there's a line that you've been quoted on, Shayne, about that it's the absence of normal. Could you give me your quote and explain that? Because to me, that just takes this a whole level further, and it's so intertwined with what you're talking about with regards to worker welfare.
Yeah, certainly. I have to take it back just slightly beforehand, because before I can bring that into context, you need to understand what the crime is. Now, first off, the exploiters are only interested in one thing, money. And the victims only have one thing in common, their vulnerability. Their vulnerability defined by the fact that they rely on somebody else. So the exploiters place themselves in a position where they can get at that money by preying on the vulnerability of others. So that's their business model, if you like. But the crime they're committing through human trafficking is action, means and purpose. The action is the transportation, harbouring, receipt, means of control and power for the purpose of making money. Now, if you apply that to our business of fruit and veg, I do that every day. The only difference between me and the exploiter, apart from a lot of morals, is the commodity. Yeah. So they are running a business, and to turn around and think that that business or that business operator would allow us to disrupt it happily, they will do everything they can to hide it and protect it and do what they need to do. So the first thing that we need to understand is the exploiter is hiding this. It's hidden in plain sight. The victims themselves are also hidden in plain sight. Because if I was to ask you to think of the most embarrassing thing you've ever done in your life and then to just suddenly tell me, you're not going to tell me.
No chance.
Right?
Yeah. No chance. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what we're asking the victims to do.
Yeah.
So they are truly hidden in plain sight.
Yeah.
So we have to go look for it. But that's when you then move on to the signs. So as Jane has got regarding her 13 points, and I've seen these, and they're great. Some of the work that's being done by businesses around the UK are fantastic because they're looking for the signs of modern slavery, and they're still important, but they in effect represent the presence of abnormal because they are a house of multiple occupancy is present and it's abnormal. But if I'm an exploiter and I know you're looking, I will hide that from you. I will falsify addresses. I will spread the load of the workers around so that you can't see that presence. If you truly want to find it and find the things that people are struggling to hide from you, you need to look for the absence of normal. I'm willing to bet those that will be listening to this have had a conversation this week with somebody to talk about what they're planning to do this coming weekend or what they did this last weekend. Now, those conversations are normal conversations, but they don't happen with a victim of exploitation. There is the absence of normal. And the only way you can see those is to train not to the highest levels of business. They just need to know they need to look for it. You need to train to the lowest levels, the people that can actually see the absence of the sign and get them to take a moment to care for the person standing next to them, to ask the questions, to look out for them. Now, a lot of people are asking some very, very good questions out there, and they're looking for these signs. But let's get smart. Let's go to really where the nitty gritty is. And if somebody sees something that's not right or doesn't feel right, they have the mechanisms to report it. And then you start finding it.
Yeah. To me, it's just, it sounds like, to me, I feel like the red flags are the kind of bed, the ground level, right? But it's the worker welfare. What you're talking about is just talking to people, knowing them, understanding them. And that's the part that makes us human, isn't it? No, that's the bit, it's in our personalities.
We had a case. We've got a campaign that we run in our business called "Are You Okay?" So that's all we're asking. Are you okay? And we encourage people to go ask other people, are they okay? And it's been nominated for awards, so we're really pleased, and we're fingers crossed that that somebody recognises. But actually, what we had on one particular case was a worker just suddenly stopped eating food. And it was the workers around him that noticed that there was a concern. Now, of course, that was the presence of abnormal, but nonetheless, they cared enough to go and check on him. Didn't find anything that was of any concern. We did some background checks, didn't. When I had a chat with him, he was just in debt and he wanted to get the debt paid off. When I told the colleagues that were working with him, with his permission, that this was going on, he came to see me 2 or 3 weeks later and said, "Shayne, can you ask them to stop? I can't eat it all." We've got a society around people that was caring for the people around them. Exploitation struggles to exist in an environment it can't breathe in. And that's all we're trying to do.
And I mean, there you are. It's just care for the people that you work with, care for the people around you. It's not just your colleagues. You might be the visitors that come to the site or the agency workers on the site. You have a duty, I suppose. Neighbours, yeah.
The community.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where we've got to go do this. This is not about business. Business just happens to be the community of work. But these people are living in our communities and society. Yeah. So there's just as many absences of normal in society as there are in the workplace. We need to be encouraging as many people as we can to go, "Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help?"
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking of instances, I'm thinking in my head, what you've said must resonate with so many people out there because it is this societal caring community feel that maybe we've lost a bit of that over the years. I mean, I know my mum would talk about how she grew up and everybody looked after each other and, we were all looking out for each other and it was a small community she grew up in. But, has it changed? Is that what the problem is in society, and should we care more for people, and then we could
Yeah.
eradicate this by caring?
It's also difficult because within business, Shan, if you find it, we're still criticising businesses for it being there.
Yeah, yeah,
When actually we need to be encouraging businesses because they found it.
yeah.
Yeah, you don't judge. My local county is Lincolnshire. I wouldn't judge Lincolnshire police because people are speeding in Lincolnshire, but I would judge them of what they are doing to try and stop speeding. The same thing applies to modern slavery. Don't judge a business that it's there because it's a societal issue. Judge them on what they're doing about it, what they're doing to prevent it, what they're doing to prepare for it, what they're doing to pursue it. Those types of things is what a business should be looking at. Not that it's there. We should be encouraging them to go find it. And then regarding the speeding analogy, actually, while I'm on that, when most businesses don't engage because they see the administrative bit that sits around it as over onerous, a bit like how we all criticise speed cameras, speed bumps. Yeah. Unless you are actually physically affected by the impact of speeding, you see the measures to control speeding and hindrance. The same thing as applies in business. Unless you are physically affected by modern slavery, you see the controls that measure it as a hindrance. And we need to change that thinking.
And that's such a good analogy, I think, if you mentioned there, about the speeding analogy, because everybody, well, not everybody, as you say, there's a speed camera, I need to slow down, or those speed bumps are terrible for my suspension. But you talk to somebody who's been affected, a family member who's been affected by somebody who's been speeding, injured or a death, then they look at those things completely differently. Yeah. And that's exactly what you're saying about business and modern slavery. And it's not a hindrance, it's actually, embrace these things.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. That's exactly what we've got to come from. And we need to encourage people to not walk away from the problem. We actually have this as a pride. We've got this, I have this as a personal pride. Ever since 2000, whenever I've found an exploitation issue, I have never once walked away. Yeah. Apart from the 53 when my family got threatened. Oh, yeah. Every single time since then, we've walked towards it. Mm-hmm. Because the only way you can do something to resolve it is if you are then engaging to try and learn, to see what you can do to improve, to prevent. That's the minimum you get out of every case. Sometimes you get far better than that because you really get rewarded by taking some victims out of for exploitation and years later seeing them as survivors. Yeah. That's truly rewarding. Yeah. But we should never get to that point because we should have prevented it in the first place.
And this is this drive, isn't it? This is this. And it sounds like to me, Shayne, what you're saying, it's internal, it's in there for everyone, right? And it's getting it out. And how does that manifest itself in the workplace, in your business, in your process? You talked about Are You Okay as a program that you're delivering there, that's just asking people how they're doing and identifying if somebody has an issue, then let's work together to try and help them and support them. So some really,
exactly it.
Really, really wise words, Shayne. And it's just something that I see. So I'll tell you my little bit of a story here in Scotland. In the businesses that I've spoken to, some have said to me, it doesn't happen here, or that happens in England, or the southeast of England, or in Lincolnshire. That's that's what you see. That's what you see in the news, whatever it may be. But that's not true, because actually here in Scotland we've had more victims of labour exploitation specifically last year than we've ever had. There was 512 victims of modern slavery and human trafficking rescued last year, up 125% in the year before. So this problem's only getting worse, and I see it on the ground here that not just talk of investigations going on, but also the victims that get referred to us by the charity that supports them has increased significantly. That we're trying to help these people get work, and I'm seeing at least one, maybe two a week coming through now that we're trying to support and help. So it's not going away. And again, this is me just being born and brought up in Scotland. It's not an English problem. It's not the rest of the UK. This is happening, as you said, in plain sight where we live.
Yeah. Well, the actual figure for the United Kingdom reported by the Global Slavery Index is 136,000 victims across the whole of the UK. That's 1 in 480 people. So if you've got a labour pool greater than 480, by the law of averages, you've got it. Never mind looking at the more vulnerable areas of our society, it's there. We have to be grown up enough to just accept that it's there. Now what we're going to go do? Right, but what we're still in this stage, this immaturity as a country of, oh, how terrible, it's there. No. Right, we've got to get past that. It's there. Everybody who's watching this, wake up. It's there. Now what are you going to go do? Go do something.
Yeah.
Stop being shocked about it.
Yeah.
Now what are we going to go do? And that requires us to actually start taking steps, start taking measures about how we spend our pound, how we ask questions, how we start acting in society, how we treat fellow man, how we, and woman of course, how we are within in our businesses. Yeah. What decisions are we making that could impact negatively on people within our business and supply chain?
Yeah.
The most important of all, we put the victim centric. We have to do that. There's no choice. It's the alternatives is not something as a society I want to live in, and I want my granddaughters to grow up in.
Fantastic, Shayne. I think you've covered so many points, so many pertinent points to what we're trying to do as a nation, not just Scotland. I mean, as a country here, as the UK, what we're trying to do, and it's joining up those dots. I think what we'd like to do with Scotland against modern slavery is continue to raise this awareness. And as we progress into the next steps with regards to this movement, this network, we'd be delighted to have you join us for a round table to talk to more business about this.
I would love to, but if there's one thing that I can ask that the network for modern slavery in Scotland to deal with, the collaboration part is absolutely crucial. I made a slight reference to it earlier. But our first duty is to prevent. Our next duty is to prepare for those that we can't prevent. Once we've got it, and because we prepare and we found it, we need to make sure we have the relevant provisions to protect the victims and work with the authorities to pursue those guilty of the crime. I do not and have not met anybody in the last 20 years or so that is able to do even one of those alone.
Yeah.
Never mind all of them. Collaboration is absolutely key because you need to have a full network to help you deal with a case when it faces you. So what you're doing in Scotland to put together this network against modern slavery is fundamental to the answer. And I encourage you to have every success. I'm sure you will.
Shayne Tyler, fantastic. You are an inspiration, and I'm sure anyone listening or watching will feel the same way that I do. And we, as delighted to have you on. I'll be keen to keep you involved in this network as we grow and as we build on this through 2021. The message that you've said is clear, very, very clear. And the business case for becoming part of this is that you couldn't be any more direct about this. Collaboration is so important. And it's not a business case, as you said. It's humans, it's society, it's within us all to do something about this together, and we can do this and not let it continue. So, Shayne, you've been phenomenal discussion this afternoon or this morning, sorry, and I'd welcome you back anytime. So, Shayne Tyler, Director of Compliance or Group Compliance Director for Fresca Group, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, and good luck.